Welcome to the show that looks at truth, fiction, and reality with a smirk. I'm Aaron Peterson.
I'm Amanda Sink.
And I'm Zach Parkerson.
And welcome to Smirk. Every other week, one of our hosts introduces an original story, which we then use as a springboard for a spirited and lighthearted discussion on whatever the moral or theme is. Welcome back to season 4 of Smirk. And it's going to be my story this week. What have you guys been up to? Have you been writing stories this whole time?
No.
Yeah, not at all.
Mostly, critical video game reviews, of course. But that's about it. I've thought about writing stories at least 100 times.
So you've written them in your head?
I'm always writing stories in my head.
Okay, well, you just need to put them to paper. So you're still writing stories. Nobody else gets them.
I don't know if Stephen King would approve.
So who's writing the story on the election? Please tell me no one.
Nobody.
Certainly not the American people.
They're definitely not reading the story. They're just partaking in it. Man, I think when we went on hiatus back in June, July, whenever that was, I was really expecting that COVID would be gone by the time we got back. Turns out, not gone.
I was really worried we were going to come back and have nothing to talk about but stories of the apocalypse. We're getting pretty close.
We have enough of that in real life. We don't need stories on it.
We'll be fine. I've seen enough episodes of The Walking Dead. I know everything I need to do. Can goods, kill your friends, hide in a barn.
And always shout, Carl!
Coral! I'm dying inside, Coral! Dying! All right, we're going to get into Smirk. Why not? Because it's that time. So if you like Smirk, every app has a share feature. Please do us a favor and share this episode on your social media outlets. Sincerely, it does wonders. We have a story that's going to be Halloween themed because, alas, Halloween is here.
You could say that this is Halloween. This is Halloween. Halloween.
I love it.
First off, favorite movie to watch on Halloween? Is it Halloween 3? Please tell me it's
Halloween 3. Or like for Halloween?
On the day of Halloween. This is, I know that everybody has, I got to watch 16 different ones, but let's say the month of October, you have to watch this one movie every Halloween, no matter what.
Tall order, man.
Yeah, I have a toss-up.
Nope, no toss-ups.
Well,
one
I'm
movie.
Tossing it up. It's Scream or it's Trick or Treat. Because I'm never going to miss Scream, but I typically watch that earlier in October. And on the day, I watch Trick or Treat now.
So, yeah, now. So it sounds like Scream is the one that...
Historically,
hold
yes. Scream has pulled for many more years.
What do you got, Zach?
I feel like such an improper fan of movies because horror is such a disposable genre to me. I watch them once,
What?
done.
What?
You
watch them once, they're out of here. You know what I love? I'll rewatch
disgusting.
I'll rewatch the Friday the 13th movies. Those are a lot of fun.
All right, good call.
But in terms of Halloween movies themselves, like I don't have the fervor for Halloween that it seems everyone has gotten.
Well, it sounds like you're just wrong, then.
It feels like you're missing out on joy.
Maybe the Evil Dead remake. That would be a good one.
Hey,
that is a good one.
That's a good one.
It's
Especially
good.
the very last shot of the movie.
It's groovy.
Yeah, it is, right?
Army of Darkness is not a horror movie, but it is great.
That's a good Halloween movie.
Yes.
Well, I'm glad you said Friday the 13th. That's going to tie into my story a little bit. Spoiler alert.
Well, what's yours?
Silver Bullet.
That's a good one.
I watched Silver Bullet. Usually, I've always kind of watched it by myself for the most part, but I watch it every October for whatever reason.
I do like to watch Sleepy Hollow around this time of year.
Oh, that's a great movie. Christina
I haven't
Ricci.
seen that movie since it came out-ish, like years ago.
I was quite obsessed with it as a child.
It was before Johnny Depp actually became Jack Sparrow.
Right. Yes.
You see him in interviews now, he's like, what? And he talks very, very slow, and he seems very drunk.
Well, it's probably not his fault. It's probably all the beaties he's taken from Amber Heard.
Savage.
Did you catch that? What? That ass beating. Bam! Gotcha. All right, you know what? Let's get away from domestic violence and get back into Smirk. It's time for my story. We are on a mission to kill 3 girls in Tent 1. That was all the random note left inside a discarded donut box said when they received it a month prior. And it was all the camp counselors could think about now. Despite this obvious distraction, things had relegated back to a basic level of normalcy at the camp. It was 6 a.m. on June 13th, and Laurie was exhausted. Her duties at the Broken Arrow summer camp were soon to commence with a full group of young campers, and she had yet to even hit the showers. She reflected back on her choices from the previous night, specifically the drinking and sexy over-the-clothes romp with fellow counselor Brian, and now she realized it was time to pay her dues. Thankfully, there are few cures for a hangover better than a good old-fashioned glass of water and a shower, so Laurie chugged a bottle of Aqua down and left her tent to head down to the shower. Now, the trail to the showers was long and desolate. No one was up just yet, and the sun had barely risen. In fact, it was that slight moment of the morning where dawn is cresting the landscape, slightly dark, but the day was vastly approaching. The trail was easy to traverse in broad daylight, but Laurie found it a bit more difficult with such dimness. As Laurie wound the final bend of the shower house, she noticed something laying off to the side of the trail. At first she thought it to be an animal or a discarded backpack, but it was far too long to be either of those things. And she approached the object, cautiously as she was trained. And as she grew closer, she realized it was a sleeping bag. How odd, she thought. Who the hell would leave their sleeping bag lying in the middle of the trail? Now only at arm's length away, Laurie noticed the sleeping bag wasn't discarded, it was occupied. She leapt back, terrified that this was an elaborate trap some serial killer had designed to lure in teenage counselors to dire fates. Yet as Laurie stared on, the bag was perfectly still. Finally, Laurie overcame her fears and sheer common sense and decided to look inside the bag. She reached for the zipper, eyes closed, and slowly began to pull the zipper down. She could hear each eyelet releasing as she pulled, continuing until she reached the bottom of the bag. With her eyes still closed, Laurie grabbed hold of the bag and pulled it open. Nothing moved. Perfect quiet. Laurie opened her eyes and immediately leapt back at least 5 full yards. The horror left her mouth widely gaped yet unable to utter a sound. It wasn't simply the one body of a young girl from her camp, Laurie Lee from Tent 1 to be exact. It was the 2 other bodies lying underneath her. 3 little girls, all dead, all stuffed in the same sleeping bag and discarded, as though their lives meant nothing to the monster who did this. And make no mistake, Laurie thought, only a monster could do this. Laurie's eyes darted around the area, noticing a shoe print next to the bag, and a red flashlight discarded directly on top of the bodies. Almost as if the killer was taunting the eventual investigators. Laurie knew she needed to summon help, but first she needed to catch her breath, and to do so, she again closed her eyes. Laurie's eyes finally opened as she finished recounting to the police the events of that morning on June 13th, 1977. 43 years had gone by, and it still felt like today for her. She wiped a tear from her cheek, probably the 1,000th tear she'd shed for those girls over the years, all the while eternally looking over her own shoulder for the killer that remained on the loose. Laurie looked up to the police officer leading the interrogation and softly asked, "Officer, why did I need to relive this again?" The officer firmly and happily replied, "Laurie, that flashlight had a fingerprint, and yesterday, we finally got a match." The news hit Laurie like a punch to the gut. It took a minute to register with her exactly what that meant. And once it finally sank in, Laurie rose her head, and for the first time since the 13th of June, 1977, she smiled, thinking of those beautiful little girls in Tent 1. Bow, bow, bow. That's the end of my story.
That felt like I was picturing, I was definitely picturing Jason as the killer throughout this.
Right, very, very Camp Crystal Lake.
Was it now?
I said
it felt like it.
Oh, you're for me. That's what it feels like, man.
What do you think the moral or theme of this one is?
Don't unzip the bag.
It's a good one. It's a good point.
Right. never unzip. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, chastity. That's definitely an allegory.
Absolutely.
Don't unzip the bag. So basically just leave it there and just ignore it forever.
If she wouldn't have looked, she wouldn't have all this trauma and terror for the rest of her life.
Let it rot. Let the bodies rot. Let the parents never know. The families don't find out. The whole thing. Okay. We see where Amanda is.
Something about trauma, maybe? Traumatic experiences. Careful of your curiosity.
But there's a resolution in the story. Like, we didn't have to get a resolution. So maybe something about how, like, patience and you'll, I don't know, maybe not patience. No, because it's too traumatic. I don't know, man. There's a few
have
things.
a little patience.
Is the moral of the story, Cobra Kai never dies?
You've just been waiting to use that all summer. You're like, oh.
Yeah, man. I just discovered the show. Too late.
Yeah, welcome to 2 years ago. The moral of this one.
Whoever shall hold this hammer shall possess the power of Thor.
That is the theme. It was buried. You really had to look for it. No, the theme was never give up hope.
Oh, okay. So my patience kind of worked.
No, not even a little.
Yeah.
But, you know,
what?
Well, no, I was going to say, like, patience and you'll get the answer.
Yeah, patience for me to deliver the answer, for you to guess it. That was incorrect.
I guess that did work out for her.
I mean, it was still kind of correct.
I don't think so.
It was.
Okay.
I don't often think along the lines of hope, so I guess it didn't cross my mind.
Well, that's sad.
Well, you know what? If I had hope, it would have been gone by the time 2020.
Yeah, 2020 is the year where hope died. Well, I wanted to write a story that represented camps and summer camps, that kind of thing in horror, specifically slasher films, because that's my favorite horror genre. Even though some people apparently don't like horror around Halloween. I love it. But I wanted to change it to children instead of adults, just to ask you guys this. Does making the victims children in horror films or books or whatever property you're into feel like a cheap ploy for attention? Because it's like an automatic feeling for them.
I don't know if it's cheap. It is used quite a bit. But I don't think it's cheap because as long as, for the most part, you're still going to have the effect. Like, I can't think of too many where the corruption of that innocent child or the killing of a child didn't affect me in some way. It's everything else about the story that has to make sense. Like, was there a real purpose, or were you just trying to, like, that's the only thing you could come up with?
Yeah, sure. But storytelling is full of cheap ploys. So, it's just, also, it's just part of the genre, right?
It doesn't have to. Not always. Usually it's teenagers or adults. They don't necessarily go to kids very often. But when they do go to kids, I always wonder if that, because everybody gets disturbed. You just heard a story about kids, and I'm sure knowing that it was children was probably more disturbing than if it was adults, because typically children are seen as more innocent. They're not doing all the naughty things that teenagers do. Perhaps
most disturbing is that it did not disturb me anymore.
That definitely is probably more disturbing.
Yeah, that's concerning.
But it's also consistent, so that's good.
Yeah, I'm nothing if not consistent. I would argue, you know what? I would argue actually that you guys, dead is dead. It shouldn't matter, all right?
Maybe they should all matter equally is maybe a better way of putting that.
You're the monsters, is what I'm saying.
Wow. All right. Way to put it back on us. I appreciate
with you having that question, do you feel like it's a cheap ploy?
Do I?
Yeah.
Sometimes, yes. I feel like sometimes writers do it because it's automatic empathy, and you automatically will empathize with the character. It's quicker to get someone to invest in the characters if they're children.
Right. I guess any revenge movie, it's almost definitely...
Unless they're a-holes.
Murdered child of some sort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a good little plot point. Is what kids end up being a lot of times.
Just like in life. Saying parents. Not that these are kids.
Accurate. They should put that in the Planned Parenthood brochures.
I'm just saying.
Screenplay 101. Just like real life, kids are a plot point.
Absolutely.
Much has been made about how violence in movies is mimicked in terms of real life. And slasher movies have been popular for eons. Do you think there's a correlation to the rise in slashers with the rise of serial killers over the years?
No. First of all, aren't slashers kind of not in vogue anymore?
Well, neither are serial killers. You know what I'm saying? That's kind of my point. Like slasher thrillers started rising in the 70s and late 60s and early 70s after Psycho, and then so did serial killers. And then they started to taper off in in the last 20 years, so have serial killers.
I think the rise of serial killers has more to do with how easy life truly is compared to the before times. Because before you were too busy, you're like, what am I going to eat for dinner? I got to hunt a rabbit? And now you're just like, I got nothing better to do. I may as well chop up a kid.
Jeez. I don't know if that's how serial killers are created, but I mean, I like the psychology of it.
I'm just saying less serial killing in Victorian England because they had to work a little harder for their day. Now you can sit on your couch, order your Postmates. You don't even have to get up anymore. Life is easy, and that's why we care so much about such minor things.
So Grubhub is like delivery for serial killers then?
A serial killer is not going through a drive-thru. That's what I'm getting at here.
I could just have them come to my house.
No, I don't think media has anything to do with violence in general. I think it's an outlet, if anything else.
I also wonder if because we seem to still have a large number of murders happening. So maybe there's just less serial killers and more 1 or 2 killings
Hit
per
it, quit
person. Yeah, it's and quit it.
I did it, I'm out. I don't want to do this no more. Well, I think technology probably plays a part too, because
Definitely.
It's so much easier to get caught now. And serial killers, they got to be really, really good to get away with it.
That's why I haven't killed anyone.
Allegedly.
As far as you all know.
You started watching CSI and you're like, what? I thought this was going to be so much easier.
CSI. Oh my God, there's ejaculate under the stove.
Jesus. I can't believe you just said that out loud.
What? I didn't use the dirty word.
So when people bring that up and people are talking about it, do you feel like that's just one of those subjects that should be squashed right away because you can't really say that there's a correlation definitively?
Between media and violence?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's just another scapegoat tactic that politicians and newscasters use to distract from the actual narrative.
Wow. What's the actual narrative? That people are just crazy? Or they're psychologically damaged?
That there certainly are crazy people that we have. As a believer in the Second Amendment, I would also say Americans have proven themselves untrustworthy of firearms. So maybe restrict some access to that, etc. Nothing NRA is going to want more than to tell you it's Jason Voorhees' fault, not the guy selling guns at the gun show.
Also, there's one of the things that I think I would point out too is there's been a significant increase in access to and advocacy for and knowledge of mental health. So that may decline some of those mass murders from happening. Mm-hmm. And typically now when we're seeing those, they happen to be school shootings. Like those are our serial killers now. While back in the 70s, you had people like a person who would just go out and they would find somebody that they wanted to eat, I guess, because they didn't have money for groceries or whatever. But now you have somebody who goes into a school and kills a mass number of people, but they're not considered a serial killer. They're a mass murderer. So we also have a different categorization for the mass murders that are happening.
Well, hang on. If they're at a supermarket and they kill somebody in the cereal aisle.
Oh my God.
By definition, one would be a serial killer.
Perhaps they choke them to death on a box of cereal.
Wouldn't that be great? Or they stick their head in there. There's got to be ways to do it. I think that would constitute.
I don't know why you guys are offering ideas and suggestions.
These are all bad ideas. None of them are going to work well for them.
I'm workshopping my next horror movie.
All right, so slasher movies. Why do we think slasher movies, i.e. movies where people are murdering people with knives and machetes and not guns, why do you think people like them? Why do you like them? If you do like them, do they even scare you?
I don't think it's really the scare that comes from slasher movies. Usually it's the thrill of, it sounds really very damaged when I put it this way, but it's the thrill of watching a cat and mouse chase and seeing if someone's going to get away or not. Like you want them to get away and you don't want them to get caught. So you're, well, okay. If
sometimes you want them.
Fair enough. Depending on who you are. And so you're invested in the story in terms of will they get away or not. And also sometimes slasher movies are really creative in their kills. Like, I know that's probably not something now in 2020 we should be saying, like, ooh, that was very creative and inventive. But I'm going to give you props if you do something that's interesting, as long as it's not real life happening. That's kind of the whole idea of movies, is that we're taken into a fictional world. And
Jason X, when he freezes that chick in liquid nitrogen and then it just breaks her face.
Jason X is a dumb movie with the best kills.
Agreed.
The sleeping bag kill in that movie is exceptional.
Yeah, agreed. Sorry, Amanda, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you didn't. And also, I think those, when we're talking about like camp horror movies, like camp slashers, there were people who were really invested in camping, and I think people still kind of are now, but they also have access to their phones and like they don't do real camping. So it was a little bit more scary then, I think, because then it felt a little bit more real in terms of those. But yeah, I don't know. That's kind of where I sit with it.
Yeah, that's why every camp movie now has to be set in 1986.
Right, get rid of the cell phone.
It's kind of hard to... I can't get a signal! Seriously, man, there's a Verizon tower across the street. We can see it in the frame.
Yeah, or the killer has to use a cell blocker.
Right.
They're fun. Slasher movies are fun. It's also a way to safely engage in a part of your brain that you're not wanting to engage in your normal day-to-day life. The cat and mouse game, whether you see yourself as a cat or the mouse. You know, that's a part of your instinct as a predatory creature you don't engage in anymore. So you can safely do it with slasher movies, or roller coasters, or whatever.
Yeah, that's kind of... to me, I kind of look at them as, you know, everybody's got Sheila at the office, or...
Always Sheila.
It's got to be Sheila. Or Bob at the store, or whatever it is. There's always somebody where you're like, God, the world would be better without Bob. And then, you know, you can watch this and vicariously think, that's funny. I wish that was Bob. And you feel better about your life a little bit. It's just living vicariously and not engaging. I think it was Amanda that said it, not engaging in that action, but just kind of having that cathartic release of whatever that angst might be.
Right. And you know what? Maybe that's why people are so angry. We don't have slasher movies anymore.
Could be. We need more. That's why we got Scream 5 coming. Thank God.
Courtney Cox saving my life.
There's a way for you to control your experience when you're watching a movie and you're getting the same excitement and thrill and, you know, anxiety and fear that you might on a roller coaster. It's kind of how my comparison, as my analogy always has been, is I compare it to a roller coaster. It's terrifying, but the difference is I have more control over what happens in terms of my emotions, and obviously physically I can feel physically grounded because I'm watching something that's not real. And this goes back to living vicariously through it, but just experiencing something that hopefully none of us will ever have to endure. But it is something that I think we're psychologically drawn to. We're interested in knowing about the things that terrify us. We can't look away. Even if it's something that's horrifying, we can't turn away. That's the same thing about, you know, if there's a horrific car crash and you can't look away. It's because even though you're scared, you still don't want to miss what's happening. Your brain wants to engage with everything.
That all makes sense. That really does make sense.
Yeah, that checks out.
Now, let me ask you the last question, and then we can move on. We can get out of this show. We could be done with Smirk.
Forever.
Well, yeah, just for the episode. Stop, Zachary.
Do you ever feel concerned? We've all got those friends that are really into horror, you know, almost uncomfortably into horror. Do you ever get concerned when somebody's a little bit too into horror?
No. For one thing, I feel like most people are just super into horror during October. Yeah, they're fair weather horror fans. But for the year-round fan of the macabre, honestly, I feel like most of them are kind of playing it up a bit. You know, like that's their defining personality characteristic.
I see what you're saying.
You're kind of judgy. You're kind of judgy of the horror genre, the horror scene.
I mean, he's not wrong.
It's like a vegan. You know how you find out someone's a vegan? They'll tell you. So you know how someone thinks horror is the best genre? They'll tell you. That's all I'm saying. People don't do that with comedies. They're not like, oh my God, I'm such the comedy guy. You know what I mean? It's just a different kind of piece of the geek culture.
And I love to tell you how horror, it's just like comic book fan.
I was going to say it's the
fans.
same as comic book genre fans.
It's so unappreciated.
I'm the Captain America guy. You know, that person. That person is just as annoying as the horror person to me.
Honestly, the majority of the people that I know that are super invested in horror movies and TV shows and have their house Halloween-esque all year round, like that's their normal decor, because this is just, that's what they enjoy. They like the spooky season all year round, and they love these movies. They're usually some of the nicest people I've ever met. So usually. I don't see a tie between them. Or maybe they're so nice because they want to lure people in.
I mean, that's what Dahmer did, right? Like, come in, let's have a cocktail and a sandwich, and you're gonna be in the sandwich.
Yeah. But usually they're really kind, and it's never something that's crossed my mind. But I think there are so many people who, if they haven't engaged with, as Zach may say, the horror scene and the people within it, you may have some sort of assumption of what kind of person they'd be. And I've definitely met those people, kind of more uppity, who are like, if you're into horror, you must worship Satan and the devil. And no, that's not the case.
If he's going to make me good horror movies, I'll worship him. That's fine.
Oh my God.
That's fine. I knew a guy in high school, and all he would do was talk about horror movies and stuff. And then at one point he was talking about, I wonder how you get rid of a body. And that was enough where I'm like, I don't think we're going to be friends anymore. You just
I think that's just that guy.
Tiptoe the line. I always wonder when he went to jail. Like, what was the day that he actually finally got caught?
Maybe he hasn't get caught, man. Maybe he's so good at it.
Seriously, go check him out on social media.
Nope. Don't want that search history. Nope. Don't want to do it. All right, so my story, was it truth or fiction?
Well, God, I hope that it was not true.
I almost feel like I gotta say true.
That story was truth.
Yeah.
Nuh-uh.
100% truth. It actually is known as the Oklahoma Girl Scout murders, and it happened on June 13th, 1977, just like I said.
Was that a Friday?
That I don't know off the top of my head. They believe that they caught the killer in Gene Leroy Hart, but he was acquitted by a jury and died 2 years later. But he was raised a mile from Camp Scott where these murders occurred. And the DNA, they had some DNA they pulled off. But they couldn't get a match. Their tests were inconclusive with Gene Leroy Hart.
Also, that was a Monday.
Monday the 13th is not as catchy.
No, it's not.
Okay, quick aside. Was Friday the 13th a thing before Friday the 13th, or did Friday the 13th make it a thing?
It was like that. It was one of those kind of like walking under a ladder, one of those things. You know, it's just one of the, don't walk under a ladder, you'll get 7 years of bad luck. You know, nobody really thought much about it. But after those movies came out, it became synonymous with you might die on Friday the 13th.
Right.
So it became much more uncomfortable, very...
There's an actual word for this, and I can't think of it.
Superstitious.
Superstitious. That's it.
I honestly couldn't think of it either. That's why I was dancing around.
I know you were, and I was like,
God.
Am I going to have to Google this? Because I can't think of the word, but I know there's a word for it. The black cat, the ladder, the salt.
Yes, all of them. Yeah. And people were shouting at their at their radio, and I appreciate the help. I heard you. My mind heard you.
He's that psychic.
He heard you live.
Exactly.
Friday the 13th. Great title.
No, it's not the title. My title is June the 13th.
Oh, well, I feel like that's still maybe no.
I don't think Paramount can sue me if that ends up becoming a motion picture.
Just dodging the copyright claim.
Exactly.
You know who's executive producing the next Friday the 13th movie?
Michael Bay.
LeBron James.
What?
What?
Look this up.
I don't want to look that up. I don't want that confirmed.
What ties does he have to the horror scene?
Because he can slam dunk a horror movie. What?
Yeah, but no, I guess he was a huge Friday the 13th fan that he helped get the rights back because they were in some rights nightmare.
Yeah, they were having a rights nightmare. Sean Cunningham, I think, put him there.
He threw his money and his weight behind locking it down.
Well, good. I hope we get more
Well,
Friday
good
the
for
13th
him.
movies.
That's cool.
What was the last one? Was that one with Jared Padalecki? Was that the last one we got?
That was the last one. They were going to work on a sequel, and then they went into rights hell.
Was that 2010?
It's been a while, man.
That's a long time. Great movie, though.
Yeah, and Supernatural had still been on the air for like 5 years. So that's how long ago. All right. Well, as our show goes, we will occasionally pick listener stories to read and discuss in Smirk. If you'd like the chance to have yours read, email it to mystory@smirkpodcast. I know one person sent one in. We haven't done it yet. We are going to do it soon. Promise. So just hold tight for that. We just might have to trim it up a little bit. But that's going to do it for this show. If you like Smirk, please share the episode on your social media outlets. You can always join the conversation by joining our Facebook group. Follow us on Twitter @Smirk Podcast. Be sure to use the show's hashtag Smirk and subscribe to Smirk on your podcast app of choice. Our website, smirkpodcast.com. You guys ready to head out of here?
Well, I'm going to be looking over my shoulder the whole time. But yeah.
Excellent. Excellent.
Ooh, if I got to follow the cold shiver running up my spine.
Well, we are out of here. And as you write your own life story, hopefully a very scary story, always remember to tell it with a smirk.
Count Dracula swung back?
Man,
You just messed up his final line.
don't step on it. Don't do it. Don't do it. This is a glory out.
Suckhead.
And as you write your own life story, always remember to tell it with a smirk. That was horrible.
It wasn't the worst, but it could have been better.
Not your worst impression.